Hi everyone! Today I want to talk to you about how to use MBTI and Enneagram to better get along with other people. This can mean preventing conflict, it can mean managing conflict better, but it can also mean things like just functioning more harmoniously with each other or working together better in a team, for example, whether that's at work or it's in a personal project. But basically how to use the knowledge and wisdom from both of these typology systems in order to get along and interact better with other people. So all about that in the next few minutes. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's dive in. So, beyond the more complex and deep aspects of personality psychology, like, for example, cognitive functions and the archetypes and what these things mean, I believe that typology is also extremely insightful when it comes to looking at interaction styles and also triads, this more so in the Enneagram system. So what I mean by that is what typology can tell us about how people kind of act, how people exchange energy in a specific kind of context, and what this means for the relationship or for the, teamwork dynamic, and so on and so forth. So if we look at MBTI, or at least, Jungian typology, I really like using Linda Burns's interaction style model, which talks about how to group the 16 types into 4 different groups based on the way they interact with the world and with each other. So for example, in this theory we have control types. These are the ESTP, ESTJ, ENTJ and ENFJ. Then we have chart the course types. They are also known as the finishers: INFJ, INTJ, ISTJ and ISTP. Then for the behind the scenes group we have INTP, INFP, ISFP and ISFJ. And for the Get Things Going group, also known as the starters, we have ENTP, ENFP, ESFP, and ESFJ. And the reason why these interaction styles are extremely helpful is because, first of all, they show us certain patterns in communication. The control types and the chart the course, also known as the finisher types, so pretty much all the J types except for ESFJ and ISFJ, and including ESTP and ISTP, these 2 groups have a directive style of communication. All the other types, so the behind the scenes types and the get things going types, they have an informative style of communication. And I find this difference to be particularly helpful because, especially in the workplace, people tend to get annoyed at each other when they have a different style of communication. So the direct or directive communicators are types that are more likely to prefer answering a question concisely or kind of directing the conversation to go in a certain way or in a certain direction. Sometimes they can also sound like they're pushing people a bit to do something or to go in a specific, direction. And they are more likely to answer questions based on what you asked them for, rather than giving you more background information that you didn't ask for. On the other hand, informative communicators are more likely to provide you with more context, with more detail. Even if you don't ask them a question with those particular things, they are more likely to give you this broader context or background information, because that's how they feel like they can actually transmit their message in such a way that you get it, you understand it, you get the full picture. Also, informative communicators are more likely to just put in information there without creating this energy of directing things in a certain way. They're more likely to provide you with context, provide you with details, and then you see what you do with the information as well. But again, we mustn't look at these things very superficially. So don't just assume that if someone answered you informatively once, they are an informative communicator, and vice versa with the directive as well. Because all people will communicate in both ways, depending on the situation, depending on the context. So it's really important to look at the patterns and what they tend to do most often. So the simple awareness of this difference, because it's nothing too complicated, it's nothing too, difficult to understand, But a simple realization and awareness of these differences can really help you to better communicate with others. I try to make use of this all the time when I interact with people in a work kind of context, but also personally. And if someone is more of an informative communicator, I try to adapt my normally directive style to fit better with that. And again, if someone is a directive communicator, then it's easier to also kind of exchange information in that way. And this also helps us to not take things personally, because sometimes people really make a lot of assumptions about what someone says and how someone says it, even though it's actually not like that. So I was once noticing this interaction between an ENTJ and an ENFP in the workplace. The ENTJ was managing the ENFP, and the ENTJ is a directive communicator, whereas the ENFP is an informative communicator. So they met, and the ENTJ wanted some updates on a project, and the ENFP was very eager to share, but she just gave a lot of context, and she seemed like she was beating around the bush and not giving a direct answer to his questions. So the ENTJ got upset, and he thought the ENFP was avoiding giving him some, problematic information about that project. Whereas the ENFP got annoyed because she felt like the ENTJ wasn't really listening to her and wasn't really interested to hear the whole story, which she believed was really important. So you see, this created a conflict between the two of them, even though they actually both had the same interests. They both wanted the same thing. They both wanted that project to be successful, and they were both really invested and interested in it. But simply because of the communication style difference, there was a clash, there was a conflict, and a lot of assumptions were made. So it's really important to kind of pay attention to these things and try to see, okay, if this person is this type and probably they communicate like this, what can I understand, about this person beyond the superficial things? And how can I also adapt and kind of deal better with the situation? And then, of course, interaction styles are more complex, and there's more to say there. But again, I really recommend you going deeper into Linda Burns's interaction style model. It's really, really interesting. And it can also show how sometimes, people can get annoyed at each other because they work differently. Maybe one is a little bit slower. Like, for example, the behind the scenes type, sometimes they take longer to get to a specific result because they want to spend time learning and perfecting something. Whereas the control types might really want to move faster and to make sure that things are progressing in the way that they wanted to progress. So sometimes when you put them together, they might get upset at each other because the behind the scenes types will be like, well, don't rush me into things. I need to process, I need to do things right. Whereas the control type might say, well, you are being way too slow and this means you're incompetent. And sometimes in the workplace, the control types can actually disregard the behind the scenes types at the beginning, especially. So again, awareness of these things is really, really helpful. Now, when it comes to the Enneagram, I really love the triads, and you probably noticed this from some of my previous videos. I really love looking at how people deal with conflicts differently and how people kind of try to meet their own needs. And here I'm talking about the harmonic and Hornevian triads. So in one of these classifications, for example, type 3, type 7, type 8, they are assertive types. So this means that they meet their needs by going against other people. Whereas types 4, 5, and 9 are withdrawn types. So they meet their needs by withdrawing from people. And again, because this difference exists, sometimes when you put these types together, they clash and they make assumptions about each other, even though it's not always necessary. So the assertive type might say, well, what's wrong with this person? They are so passive, they are not interested, they're not putting in the effort because they're just there in their own world, not getting involved. On the other hand, the withdrawn types might be like, well, the assertive types are trying too hard to dominate. They are too controlling. They don't let me, come up with my own ideas and do things my way. So again, they clash and conflicts occur. Even though in reality, there's actually a lot of possibility to negotiate, to learn about each other, to be empathetic, and to have flexibility in our relationships with other people. Same in a different classification. So for example, we have type 6, 4, and 8, who are reactive types. And then we have types 2, 7, and 9, who are positive outlook types. So again, when these two groups interact with each other, sometimes the positive types get frustrated because they perceive the reactive types to be too pessimistic, too negative. On the other hand, the reactive types might feel like types 2, 7, and 9 are a bit delusional because they are too positive, too optimistic, and they don't want to deal with the actual problems that they face. So in relationships, this can also cause conflict because maybe one is avoiding conflict and one is blowing conflict out of proportion. By having awareness of these differences, we can, first of all, be more empathetic towards others. Secondly, understand where they're coming from, which means that we don't immediately jump to conclusions and make assumptions about them, but rather we put the information that we have about them in a big picture understanding. And thirdly, we can also become a little bit more flexible. Because even though we all have, a preferred interaction style or a preferred communication style or a preferred triad in the harmonic or Hornevian systems, we all have the possibility to learn and develop. It doesn't mean that our type will change, but what it does mean is that we can become more well-rounded individuals with more skills, with a better ability to interact with a wide variety of people, and also with more tolerance and more respect for the differences. Because, it's really important to practice what we preach in typology. It's not enough to say, oh yes, I understand about people, and this person is this type and this person is this type. But if we just box them and then refuse to see beyond that and refuse to also work with that information, then it's not helpful. So it's really, really important to develop a more flexible mindset when it comes to interacting with others. Okay, so these are my thoughts on how typology, namely MBTI and Enneagram, can help us in our interactions, relationships, and, communications with other people. By the way, for those of you who are interested, I offer life coaching sessions aimed at helping you engage in a deeper process of self-awareness where you can learn more about yourself from different perspectives. You can use typology to deepen that level of self-awareness, and you can also improve certain skills, your communication with other people, your ability to relate to others, and of course to also find more clarity with respect to the things that really matter to you. So there's a link in the description below. You can find out more about my coaching sessions. I offer a free discovery call, so if that's interesting to you, feel free to reach out to me. Also, I have a newsletter where I send articles once every 2 or 3 weeks, usually on typology, but sometimes on related topics as well. So the link to that is also in the description below. And as always, thank you very much for being with me. Thank you very much for watching this video. See you next time with another video on typology.